I walked through the front door earlier than usual, clutching a box of half-price fried chicken, thinking I was feeding a loving family. Then I froze. My daughter-in-law was whispering to my paralyzed son in the living room. "Your fat mother is just a parasite." "Jake," she hissed. "Let her die so we can finally live." In that second, 30 years of sacrifice turned into ash. My name is Eleanor Gallagher, but the name tag clipped to my polyester blouse just says Nora. I am 58 years old, a number that feels heavier with every passing winter in Riverton. My life is a series of grey actions performed within the beige walls of Horizon County Services, where I process application forms for people whose luck has run out even faster than mine. I am invisible there. Just a pair of hands stamping documents and a back that aches in a dull, rhythmic throb. Every day at 5 o'clock, I steal 3 packets of raw sugar from the break room, slide them into my purse, and take the number 42 bus back to the cramped house I share with my paralyzed son, Jacob, and his new wife, Vanessa. Today was supposed to be different. The power grid in our block failed, plunging the office into silence at 2 in the afternoon. My supervisor waved us off early, and for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of something like freedom. I decided to use the extra hours to be a mother, not just a provider. I stopped at the grocery store on 4th Street and bought a box of fried chicken, 6 pieces for $8, because it was close to the expiration time. The box was warm against my side, a greasy, salty promise of a happy dinner. I imagined Jacob's face lighting up, the way it used to before the accident took his legs and the light from his eyes. I unlocked the front door slowly. I have learned to make myself small in my own home, stepping lightly on the floorboards that I know will creak. I thought Jacob might be napping. The air inside hit me first. It did not smell like home. It smelled of antiseptic wipes and something sour, like milk left out too long, a sharp contrast to the savory aroma of the fried chicken I was clutching like a prize. I was halfway down the hallway when I heard voices. They were coming from the living room. I stopped. My feet hurt in my cheap shoes, and I just wanted to sit down, but a pathetic part of me wanted to listen. I wanted to hear them talking about me. I wanted to hear Vanessa say something kind, or hear Jacob mention that he missed me. I needed to know that the overtime shifts and the back pain were worth it. Then I heard Vanessa. Her voice was not the sugary, high-pitched tone she used when I was in the room. It was low, flat, and terrifyingly calm. "Your fat mother is dead weight. Jake," she said. The air left my lungs. Once she's gone, every check, every insurance dollar, every inch of this house is ours. I stood frozen. The plastic bag dug into my fingers. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a violent thudding that made my ears ring. I waited for Jacob to scream. I waited for my son, the boy whose diapers I had changed, whose forehead I had wiped through fevers, whose wheelchair I had pushed until my shoulders burned, to defend me. There was a long silence. Then came Jacob's voice, weak and whining. "Don't say that. Mom still pays the bills. He did not say he loved me. He did not say I was his mother. He only mentioned the bills." I felt the blood drain from my face. The hallway seemed to tilt sideways. My grip on the bag loosened, and the box of chicken slipped. It hit the floor with a wet, heavy slap. The plastic container popped open, and a drumstick rolled out, leaving a smear of orange grease across the linoleum I had scrubbed 2 days ago. Inside the living room, Vanessa laughed. It was not a happy sound. "She won't live forever, baby," Vanessa said. her voice dripping with a sweetness that made me nauseous. And we don't have to share a single cent with her. I stepped back. I had to get away. I could not let them see me. I picked up the chicken with trembling hands, my fingers slick with lukewarm grease, and retreated into the kitchen. I sat heavily on one of the wooden chairs, my coat still on, my purse still on my shoulder. Through the thin wall, I could hear them continuing. Vanessa was talking about papers now, about signatures needed for the future of our family. I sat in the darkening kitchen, the unlit stove staring back at me. I reached down and used a paper towel to wipe the grease from the floor. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely control it. I was scrubbing a stain off the floor while in the next room. The woman I had welcomed into my home was discussing my death, like it was a business transaction. As I sat there in the shadows, listening to Vanessa's soft, cutting laughter, a cold realization settled in my stomach, heavier than the cheap chicken. This was not just a bad marriage. This was a countdown. I lay in bed that night, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of a country that did not exist. My body was heavy, sinking into the mattress, but my mind was rewinding decades of my life, looking for the exact moment I had become a fool. I was not always a paper pusher at Horizon County Services. Once, I had nimble fingers. I was a hairdresser with a steady clientele, sweeping blonde curls and split ends off a checkered floor. I gave that up to go to night school when my husband, Mark, died. Mark was a steel worker, a man made of iron and soot, until a crane accident crushed him. He left me with a 16-year-old Jacob and a workers' compensation settlement that was just enough to pay off the mortgage on this drafty house. I took the job at the county, not for the joy of it, but for the pension and the health insurance. I wanted safety. I wanted to build a fortress around my son. Then came the highway. Jacob was 23 years old when a semi-truck drifted across the center line. In the span of a heartbeat, my athletic, soccer-playing boy became a statistic in a file much like the ones I stamp every day. I sold my car. I dropped out of the management courses I was taking. I spent every cent of my savings remodeling the house. I widened the door frames with a sledgehammer and my own 2 hands because I could not afford a contractor. I installed the grab bars in the bathroom. I built a life where the center of gravity was a wheelchair. That was where Vanessa found us. She was an assistant at the rehabilitation center, young, blonde, and glowing with the kind of vitality that makes old women like me feel invisible. She was 24. She wiped the drool from Jacob's chin when he was relearning to swallow, and she did it with a smile that looked like sunshine. She started calling me Mom within 3 weeks. I thought it was affection. I was desperate for it to be affection. I should have listened to the cold knot in my stomach the day she sat in the hospital cafeteria with me, stirring her diet soda. It must be hard, she had said, her eyes wide and sympathetic. But at least the state takes care of everything. I checked his file. Full disability, lifetime benefits. That is stable income. You never have to worry about layoffs with the government paying the tab. It is not about the money. Vanessa, I had told her, I would give every dime to see him walk. She had shrugged. A tiny, elegant motion. I know. But guaranteed money for life isn't bad. Most people kill for that kind of security. I brushed it off. I told myself she was just being practical when they decided to get married 6 months later. I used the last $4,000 in my emergency fund to pay for the wedding. I bought her a dress I would never have dared to buy for myself. silk and lace that cost more than my first car. I wanted them to be happy. I wanted Jacob to feel like a man, not a patient. After the honeymoon, which was just a weekend at a motel 2 towns over, Vanessa suggested she move in. It makes no sense for us to rent an apartment when this house is so big, she had said, holding Jacob's hand. We should be a family. It will be so warm. Plus, you know how to cook his favorites. So I stayed. I cooked the meals. I scrubbed the toilet. I did the laundry. I paid the electricity and the water bills because Vanessa and Jake are saving for the future. To the outside world, to the people who liked her photos on social media, we were a heartwarming story of resilience. A young beauty sacrificing her youth for a disabled husband, supported by a loving mother-in-law. But inside these walls, I was slowly becoming furniture. I was the maid who paid rent. I turned over in the dark, the sheets twisting around my legs. The smell of the cold fried chicken was still in the trash can in the kitchen, haunting the house. I thought about the way Vanessa looked at the mail when the disability checks arrived. I thought about how she memorized the schedule of the direct deposits. Your fat mother is dead weight. The words echoed in the silence. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears leaking out onto the pillowcase. I had spent 30 years building a safety net for my son, sacrificing my career, my savings, and my back. Now, in the dark, I had to ask myself a question that made my blood run cold. Did Vanessa marry Jacob because she loved him? Or did she marry the steady stream of government checks that I, the stupid bureaucrat mother, processed every day? I realized then that she did not just want my house. She wanted my absence. And looking at the ceiling, I knew that if I did not wake up, she would win. The morning sun did not bring clarity. It brought a headache and a performance I was forced to watch. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of black coffee, my eyes burning from a sleepless night. I watched Vanessa prepare Jacob's breakfast. She moved with the efficiency of a nurse, but there was something sharp in her motions. I saw her tap 2 white pills into her palm from the orange prescription bottle. The label clearly stated 1 pill every 6 hours. Isn't that a bit much? Vanessa, I asked, my voice raspy. She didn't even flinch. He had a rough night. Mum. His spasms were bad. He needs the rest. She crushed the pills into his applesauce. When she fed it to him, Jacob swallowed obediently, his eyes already glassy. He looked like a child, not a 30-year-old man. I'll get the mail, I said later, standing up as the mail carrier's truck rumbled by. Sit down, Mum Vanessa snapped, then softened her tone instantly into a sickly sweet coo. Save your legs. I'll get it. You know, looking at bills just stresses Jake out. I'm handling the administration now to reduce his stress. She walked out, and I saw her stuff a handful of envelopes into her oversized cardigan pocket. My heart hammered. I couldn't take it anymore. I heard you last night, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. I heard what you said about me being dead weight. The room went silent. Jacob blinked, trying to focus through the haze of the painkillers. Vanessa turned slowly, her face crumbling into an expression of utter shock. Then, the tears came. Instant, wet, and loud. Oh my God, she sobbed, rushing to Jacob's side and kneeling by his wheelchair. Jake, do you hear this? She was spying on us. I was venting about how hard it is to manage the budget, and she twists it into this. She looked at me with venomous eyes while clutching his hand. Mom, are you jealous? Are you that jealous that your son loves someone else? I am not jealous, I shouted, standing up. She called me a parasite. Jacob. Jacob looked between us, his head lolling slightly. He looked exhausted. He looked broken. Mom, please. He slurred. I don't want any drama. Don't make Vanessa stress out. I have suffered enough. Can't we just have peace? I felt like I had been slapped. Vanessa wiped her eyes, her victory secured. Maybe. Vanessa sniffed, stroking Jacob's arm. Maybe you should think about that brochure I left on the counter. Horizon Meadow. It is a lovely nursing home. They have doctors. Mom. You would have friends your own age. Here. Well. You are just working yourself to death for us. And it makes us feel guilty. My blood ran cold. Horizon Meadow was a warehouse for the dying, a place where the state sent people to rot. I looked at the counter where a stack of papers sat. I walked over and snatched them up before she could stop me. It was not just a brochure. Underneath it was a thick legal document, a durable power of attorney granting Vanessa full control over Jacob's medical and financial decisions. And below that, a brand new life insurance policy. I scanned the numbers. $750,000, payable upon death by accidental or medical complications. What is this? I demanded, shaking the papers. $750,000. Vanessa. You are betting on him dying. It is just standard protection. Vanessa shouted, standing up. She turned to Jacob, her voice trembling with manufactured fear. Jake, if I have to get surgery for your back, or if we need to modify a van, who is going to pay for it? Hershey makes minimum wage. We need security for our future. Don't sign it. Jacob. I pleaded. Read it first. I trust her. Jacob whispered. He reached out a shaking hand for the pen Vanessa offered. She is my wife. Mom. She takes care of me. He signed his name. The ink looked black and permanent against the white paper. I felt a wave of nausea. I tried to pull the papers away, to hide them, to tear them up, but Vanessa was faster. She grabbed my wrist with a grip that was shockingly strong, her nails digging into my skin. Jacob, she shrieked. She is stealing our papers? She is trying to ruin us. Mum? Stop it, Jacob yelled, a rare burst of anger in his voice. Stop trying to wreck my marriage. Apologize to her. Now I looked at my son. His face was twisted in pain and drug-induced confusion. He saw me as the enemy. I had no choice. If I fought, she would kick me out today, and he would be alone with her and the double dose of painkillers. I am sorry, I muttered, looking at the floor. Louder, Vanessa said coldly. I am sorry, I said, my voice breaking. I retreated to the hallway, defeated. As I passed Vanessa, she leaned in close. So close I could smell her floral perfume masking the scent of her cruelty. You are not the only one who knows how to play the paper game, she whispered. I realized then that she knew exactly where I worked. She knew my world better than I thought. And she had just declared war on my own turf. 3 weeks later, the system I had served for 20 years decided to eat me alive. It started with a notification on my work computer, a blinking red exclamation point that usually meant a server error. But this was an email from Human Resources. The subject line read, "Immediate suspension, pending internal investigation." My hands went cold. I was escorted out of the building by a security guard I had shared coffee with for a decade. He did not look me in the eye. They told me there had been an anonymous complaint. Someone alleged that I had abused my clearance level to manipulate client data for personal gain. Specifically, my employee ID had been used to access Jacob's disability file at 3 in the morning and reroute a retroactive payment of $4,000 to a joint account managed by his primary caregiver, Vanessa. I sat in my living room 2 days later as an internal investigator. A man named Mr. Henderson, who smelled of stale tobacco and judgment, laid out the file. Mrs. Gallagher. The digital footprint is undeniable, he said, tapping a printout. Your login, your password. I was asleep, I protested, my voice shaking. I have never touched his file. It is a conflict of interest. Vanessa walked in from the kitchen, holding a tray of tea. She looked fragile, her eyes wide with feigned confusion. Oh, Mr. Henderson, she said softly. Please don't be too hard on her. Mum, well, she has been under so much financial pressure lately. She used to joke that she could just fix the numbers if she wanted to. My mouth fell open. I never said that. Vanessa looked at Jacob, who was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, refusing to look at me. Jake. Remember? She said the system owed us. Jacob looked down at his lap. I think I remember something like that. That was the nail in the coffin. Horizon confiscated my badge and froze my salary pending the inquiry. The immediate effect was catastrophic. Without my paycheck, the electricity bill bounced. 2 days later, the lights flickered and died. Vanessa lit candles, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. She sat close to Jacob, whispering loud enough for me to hear. She's dragging us down to the bottom. Jake, we can't live like this. Stress triggers your spasms. The final blow came not from the county, but from our landlord, a faceless conglomerate called Brightline Homes. The letter arrived via certified mail. They were selling the property. We had 30 days to vacate, because the lease had been renewed under Jacob and Vanessa's names to build their credit score. I had no legal standing. We found a place. Vanessa announced the next morning. She was packing boxes, labeling them with a thick black marker. It is the Lofts, downtown, closer to the hospital. Wheelchair accessible. Very modern. I looked at the boxes. There is no room for me in a loft. Vanessa, she didn't even look up. Exactly. We talked about it. With your legal troubles and the fraud investigation, the landlord won't accept you on the lease. It is too risky. Plus, Horizon Meadow has a bed opening up next week. It is for the best. I looked at Jacob. You are kicking me out after everything. It is not kicking you out. Mom, Jacob said, his voice thin and reedy. It is just transitioning. Vanessa says you will be happier with people your own age. You won't have to cook or clean. You can just rest. I realized then that I was not fighting a person. I was fighting a narrative she had spun perfectly. I was the fraudster, the burden, the criminal mother. My own health insurance card was declined at the pharmacy that afternoon when I tried to pick up my blood pressure medication. The pharmacist told me my account was flagged for suspicious activity. I stood there, dizzy, my heart fluttering in a rhythm that felt dangerous, realizing she had reported me to the insurance board too. I packed my life into 2 suitcases. That was all I had after 30 years. I moved into the Starlight Motel, a crumbling building off the interstate where the sheets smelled of bleach and regret. It cost me $50 a night, draining the last of the cash I had hidden in a shoebox. The first night there, I called Jacob, I needed to hear his voice. I needed him to say he made a mistake. Jacob, I said into the receiver, sitting on the edge of a mattress that felt as hard as a slab of concrete. I am at a motel. I am scared. There was a long pause on the other end. I need her. Mom, Jacob said. His voice was colder than I had ever heard it, stripped of all the warmth I had nurtured since he was a baby. Vanessa is all I have now. You. You always survive. You are tough. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The line clicked dead. I lay back on the bed. Outside, a semi-truck roared past, shaking the thin window pane. I looked at my hands. No wedding ring. No employee ID. No keys to the house I paid for. I was entirely erased. I stared at the popcorn ceiling and wondered, in the quiet dark, if I stopped breathing right now, would Vanessa cry at the funeral? Or would she just be relieved that she didn't have to share the life insurance payout if I die tonight? I whispered to the empty room. She will probably open a bottle of champagne. I stood in line at the Salvation Army on 6th Street, clutching a paper ticket that guaranteed me a scoop of mashed potatoes and a slice of meatloaf. It had been 4 days since I left the motel because I ran out of money. I was sleeping in a women's shelter now, sleeping with one eye open to guard my shoes. Nora Gallagher, I turned. Standing behind me was a woman I had not seen in 10 years, Rosa Martinez. She was in her 60s now, her hair completely silver, but her eyes were just as sharp as they were when she sat across from my desk at Horizon, back then. She was applying for assistance after a hip surgery. Before that, she had been an insurance fraud investigator for 30 years. Rosa, I said, trying to smooth my wrinkled coat. I am just volunteering. Rosa looked at my scuffed shoes and my hollow cheeks. She did not buy it. Cut the crap. Nora, she said, her voice low and raspy like sandpaper. You look like you went 12 rounds with a shredder. What happened? We sat on a park bench with our styrofoam trays. I told her everything. I told her about the chicken, the whispers, the investigation, the suspension. When I finished, Rosa didn't offer pity. She offered a cigarette and a cold smile. You didn't just fall through the cracks. Honey, she said, lighting up. You were pushed. And the way she did it. Using your own login to flag herself, that is professional grade. That is not a daughter-in-law having a bad day. That is a predator working a system. The next morning, Rosa took me to the public library. We sat at a computer terminal in the back corner. If she is this good at paperwork, Rosa muttered, typing furiously with 2 fingers. This isn't her first rodeo. Let's see who Vanessa really is. It took Rosa 3 hours to find the crack in Vanessa's armor. It wasn't under the name Vanessa Gallagher, or even her maiden name. It was under a previous name, Vanessa Ray. Look at this. Rosa pointed at the screen. It was a digitized article from a small-town newspaper in Ohio, dated 5 years ago. Vanessa had worked at a long-term care facility called Silver Pines Care. She was terminated for internal reasons. Internal reasons usually means they didn't want the police involved because of the bad press, Rosa explained. She made 2 phone calls to old contacts, speaking in rapid-fire Spanish and English. When she hung up, her face was grim. 2 elderly men, Rosa said, severe malnutrition and financial irregularities. Their families settled out of court. And get this. Before she came to Riverton, she was married for 11 months to a man named David. He was a paraplegic, died of medical complications involving an insulin overdose. She walked away with a life insurance payout of $200,000. I felt like I was going to throw up. It was a pattern. Find a vulnerable man. Isolate him. Drain the accounts. Let nature or a helpful nudge take its course. She used your credentials. Nora, Rosa said, tapping the table. She watched you type that password. She memorized it. She logged in as you to make herself the primary caregiver, and you the fraud. You were the perfect scapegoat to explain where the money went. We needed eyes inside the house. I borrowed Rosa's burner phone and texted the only person left in that neighborhood who spoke to me. Tyler, the 17-year-old boy next door who used to help Jacob with his video games. Tyler texted back immediately. Are you safe? You need to see this. He sent a link. It was a live stream on a platform I had never heard of. The channel was titled The Devoted Wife Caring for Jake. I clicked it. The video showed Vanessa sitting in my living room, looking tired and angelic, with perfect lighting. It is just so hard. Vanessa was saying to the camera, wiping a tear. His mother. She was a monster. She stole from his disability fund to gamble. She verbally abused me every day. I am just trying to keep Jake safe. But the legal fees are drowning us. On the side of the screen, little animated hearts and stars were popping up. People were commenting, "You are a saint." Vanessa and kick that old hag to the curb and donated $50. Hope it helps. I saw myself in the background of a previous video she had posted. She had used a filter to make my skin look grey and greasy. She had edited the audio to make my voice sound screechy and demanding. She was monetizing my destruction. I stared at the screen, watching my son sleeping in the background, looking thinner than I remembered. The shame I had felt for weeks evaporated. In its place was something cold and hard, like the steel of the factory where my husband used to work. She likes cameras, I said, handing the phone back to Rosa. She likes telling stories. So Rosa asked. So, I said, standing up. If she wants to film a reality show, I am going to give her a documentary. But this time, the audience won't be teenagers on the internet. It will be the district attorney. The back door lock clicked open with a soft metallic snap. Tyler, the 17-year-old boy from next door, gave me a nervous thumbs up and retreated into the bushes. I slipped into my own kitchen like a thief. It smelled of stale air and the lavender spray Vanessa used to mask the scent of neglect. I had 45 minutes before Jacob's physical therapy session was supposed to end. I moved fast. My hands, usually steady when stamping forms, were sweating. I taped a tiny camera, no bigger than a matchbox, to the top of the kitchen cabinets, angling it toward the table where Vanessa counted the bills. I hid another one on the bookshelf in Jacob's room, pointing it squarely at the bed. Finally, I taped a voice recorder under the dining table. I should have left then. But I needed the policy number of the old insurance plan, the one Mark had set up years ago, to prove she was double-dipping. I opened the junk drawer. The front door opened. Appointment was cancelled. Can you believe it? Vanessa's voice drifted in, clear and cheerful. I froze. I was standing in the kitchen, holding a heavy, sealed envelope from the Department of Veterans Affairs that I had pulled from the drawer. Vanessa walked in, pushing Jacob. She stopped dead when she saw me. For a second, her face was blank. Then, a smile curled on her lips, sharp and terrifying. "Jake," she whispered. "She is back." Then she screamed. It was a blood-curdling sound, loud enough to wake the neighbors. She grabbed her phone and dialed 3 numbers. 911. Please. Send help. My mother-in-law broke in. She has a weapon. She has a knife. I don't have a knife. I shouted, holding up the envelope. Vanessa, stop it. I just wanted the papers. Stay back, she shrieked, backing Jacob's wheelchair into the corner. Don't hurt him. Jacob looked at me, his eyes unfocused, his head lolling to the side. Mum, just go. Please don't hurt her. Jacob, I am holding a letter, I pleaded, stepping forward. Sirens wailed outside. 2 uniformed officers kicked the door open less than 3 minutes later. I was shoved against the refrigerator, my face pressed into the cold metal. Handcuffs bit into my wrists, sharp and tight. I live here, I yelled. But the officer twisted my arm up. Not anymore. Ma'am, he said. I was marched out past the neighbours. I saw Mrs. Higgins covering her mouth. I saw Tyler watching from his attic window. Vanessa stood in the doorway, sobbing into Jacob's shoulder, playing the terrified victim perfectly. I was booked at the county precinct. They took my fingerprints. They took my mugshot. The flash blinded me, searing the humiliation into my retinas. The charge was domestic disturbance and terroristic threats. That night, I sat on a steel bench in a holding cell that smelled of urine and bleach. Across from me sat a woman named Keisha. Her arms were covered in tattoos of roses and skulls. She looked me up and down. You don't look like a knife fighter, Keisha said, her voice gravelly. I didn't do it, I whispered, staring at the concrete floor. She lied. She is killing my son slowly, and nobody sees it. Keisha laughed, a short, barking sound. Honey, if you wanted to beat her, you should have swung. But you didn't. Now you are in here. And she is out there. She leaned forward, her eyes serious. You can't fight a liar with truth. You fight a liar with paper. If you want to kill a snake, you don't grab its tail. You cut off its head. You don't need violence. You need to read the law. Rosa bailed me out at 6 a.m. She looked tired. The desk sergeant handed me a piece of yellow paper. Restraining order. He grunted. 500 feet. You go near that house again, Mrs. Gallagher, and you won't get bail next time. I turned on my phone. There was one text message from Jacob. Vanessa is panicked. She is shaking. Don't make her scared anymore. Mum, please just leave us alone. I deleted the message. I did not cry. The tears had dried up in the cell. Keisha was right. Screaming got me arrested. Breaking in got me restrained. If I wanted to save Jacob, I had to stop acting like a mother and start acting like an auditor. I went back to the library with Rosa. I pulled a specific form from the state website, report of suspected abuse, neglect, or exploitation of a vulnerable adult. I did not sign my name. In the line for the reporter's identity, I checked the box for anonymous. I began to write. I detailed the missed therapy sessions. I listed the specific dates where bank withdrawals coincided with Jacob's sedation levels. I used the correct codes for financial coercion and medical neglect. I was no longer Eleanor Gallagher, the heartbroken mother. I was a ghost in the machine. You sure about this? Rosa asked, watching me seal the envelope. She wanted me to be a stranger, I said, my voice flat and cold. So I will be the stranger that brings the whole house down. I dropped the letter into the mailbox. It hit the bottom with a soft thud. The war had moved from my living room to the state archives. The motel room wall was no longer bare. It was covered in butcher paper Rosa had stolen from the deli, mapped out with a spiderweb of timelines and arrows. We were not grieving mothers anymore. We were architects of a collapse. She is sloppy with the hours, Rosa said, pointing to a column of dates. She claimed 40 hours of intensive care last week. But Tyler's footage shows she was at the mall for 12 of them. That is theft of state funds, I said, uncapping a red marker. Strike one. We compiled 3 identical dossiers. No emotional letters, no handwritten pleas. Just data. Spreadsheets matching her social media check-ins with her billing logs. We sent the first to the State Department of Social Services. The second went to the fraud department of the private insurance company paying for Jacob's specialized therapy. The third went to Justice for All, a disability rights legal group that lived for high-profile negligence cases. Tyler arrived late, his hood pulled up. He handed me a USB drive. "You need to see the file dated Tuesday," he said, his voice cracking. We plugged it into the battered laptop. On screen, Vanessa stood in the kitchen. She was scraping half of Jacob's dinner, a pathetic portion of mashed potatoes, into the trash. Then, the camera caught her pushing his wheelchair near the stairs. She didn't lock the brakes. As he slid backward, gasping in panic, she laughed. "Oops," she said to the empty room. "Almost lost you there." "Babe." Then came the audio from the recorder under the table. Her voice was crystal clear. "The worse he looks, the more people donate," she told someone on the phone. "Stop telling me to feed him. If he gains weight, he looks healthy. Healthy doesn't pay for my manicure. Let the fat old woman feed him if she wants." "Oh, wait. She is gone?" "I am going to kill her," Rosa growled. "No," I said, my voice steady. "We are going to bury her in litigation." Rosa had another card to play. She had called in a favor from an old archivist at Horizon. She returned with a photocopy of a document that was supposed to be shredded 5 years ago. It was an internal memo regarding Vanessa Ray, flagged for suspicious mortality trends at Silver Pines. It had never been signed by the director, likely buried to avoid a lawsuit. This establishes a pattern. A new voice said, Malik Jordan, the lawyer Keisha introduced us to, leaned against the motel doorframe. He was young, hungry, and wore a suit that cost more than my car used to. He flipped through the Silver Pines report. "This is not just domestic abuse. This is systemic predation. We can sue her for civil damages, and we can sue the agencies that enabled her. But we need the state to pull the trigger first." "I know how to do that," I said. I knew the Horizon algorithm. I knew that certain transaction codes, when flagged manually, bypassed the local supervisors and went straight to the state auditor. I logged into a public terminal using a generic whistleblower account. I did not write a narrative. I simply uploaded a spreadsheet of transfers from Jacob's disability account to a shell company Vanessa had set up called Ray Consulting. I tagged them with code 99, red immediate suspicion of embezzlement. Once I hit send, I told them. The system freezes the assets within 48 hours. She won't be able to buy a stick of gum. She will panic. Malik warned. When rats panic, they bite. Let her bite, I said. We have teeth now, too. Tyler set up a script to archive her entire video channel. Every tearful plea, every donation request, every frame of her exploiting my son was being downloaded to a secure server. We matched the timestamps of her breakdowns to the timestamps of the wire transfers. We decided on the final strategy. My name would appear on nothing. To the system, I was witness X. If I signed my name, they would dismiss it as a family squabble. Anonymous tips, supported by hard data. Terrified bureaucrats more than angry mothers. I stood back and looked at the wall. The arrows pointed from the bank to the insurance company, to the state board, all converging on one name, Vanessa. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't the crushing weight of grief I had carried for weeks. It was the cold, electric hum of adrenaline. I was not just surviving anymore. I was hunting. "Send it," I said. I watched the progress bar on the screen fill up. The trap was set. Now, we just had to wait for her to step into it. When the state froze the accounts on a Tuesday morning, the house I could no longer enter turned into a pressure cooker. Tyler told me he could hear Vanessa screaming through the walls. She was not screaming at the bank. She was screaming at Jacob. She told him that I was a bitter, senile woman who was trying to starve them out, that I was the one pulling the strings to destroy their happiness. Desperation made her reckless. To keep the cash flow moving, she ramped up the production schedule of her channel. I watched in horror from Malik's office as she live-streamed a session where she forced Jacob to retell the story of his accident. She had cut his pain medication by half to ensure he looked sufficiently agonized for the camera. "Tell them how much it hurts, baby," she coaxed on screen, the ring light reflecting in her predatory eyes. "Tell them how the system abandoned us." Jacob looked grey. His cheekbones were protruding sharply, and his eyes were dull, darting around the room like a trapped animal. He had lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks. When he tried to refuse to speak, she pinched his arm, hidden from the camera's angle, but visible to the tiny lens I had planted on the bookshelf. It hurts." Jacob stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Then came the text from Tyler that stopped my heart. It was a screenshot from the laptop Vanessa thought was secure. She had been browsing a forum dedicated to forensic pathology. Her search history read symptoms of sedative overdose that mimic heart failure. "She is done waiting," I told Malik, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. "She is going to cash out the policy." Malik sprinted to the courthouse to file for an emergency protective order, citing imminent danger. We attached the Silver Pines file, the video clips of the medical neglect, and the anonymous tip I had sent to the state. But the legal system moves in hours, and Vanessa was moving in minutes. On the screen, I saw her go out to the front porch. It was dusk. She was holding a bottle of cooking oil and a wrench. I watched, helpless, as she knelt by the top of the wooden wheelchair ramp I had built with my own hands. She loosened the bolts that secured the safety railing. Then, she poured a slick, invisible line of oil right at the edge where the wheels would grip for the descent. She was staging a tragedy. She was going to push him, let the rail give way, and blame it on the old, rotting house. "Call 911. I screamed at Rosa. "Now tell them it is a life-threatening emergency." At the same time, a car pulled into the driveway. It was not the police. It was the state inspector from Social Services, responding to my anonymous tip about the financial irregularities. Vanessa froze. She looked at the inspector walking up the path, then looked at Jacob, who was sitting in his wheelchair just inside the open door. She needed an accident, and she needed it before the auditor saw the books. "Time to get some fresh air." "Jake," she said, her voice tight and manic. She grabbed the handles of his chair. She shoved him forward, hard, toward the greased ramp. "No. Vanessa. Stop." Jacob cried out, gripping the wheels. "Let go," she hissed. Just as the front wheels hit the oil and the chair lurched dangerously toward the drop. The inspector shouted, running up the steps. Sirens wailed in the distance as the ambulance Tyler had summoned roared down the street. The distraction was enough. The inspector lunged forward, grabbing the frame of the wheelchair just before it tipped over the edge of the loosened railing. Jacob slumped back, hyperventilating. Vanessa stumbled back, her face a mask of artificial shock, but the body camera on the paramedic running up the driveway caught the moment perfectly. It caught the oil glistening on the wood. It caught the loose bolts. And it caught Vanessa leaning over Jacob, whispering a threat she thought no one else could hear. If you had just cooperated, this would be over by now. The paramedics pushed her aside to get to Jacob. The inspector was already taking photos of the ramp with a grim expression. Police officers were swarming the lawn, securing the scene not as a medical emergency, but as a crime scene. I watched the feed cut to black as an officer placed a hand on Vanessa's shoulder. 2 hours later, I stood outside a hospital room at Riverton General. Through the glass, I saw a doctor. I did not know a doctor. Vanessa did not pay checking Jacob's vitals. He was safe. I gripped Rosa's hand until my knuckles turned white. The restraining order said I could not go in. But the look on the detective's face as he walked toward me said I wouldn't need to hide anymore. This was no longer a domestic dispute. It was now the state of Ohio versus Vanessa Ray. The hearing at Riverton Family Court was not a criminal trial, but it felt like an execution. The room was packed tight with bodies. Half of them were local reporters who had smelled blood after the incident at the house. And the other half were curious onlookers who had followed Vanessa's channel. They wanted to see the saint or the sinner, depending on which version of the story they believed. Vanessa arrived first. She wore a modest black dress that made her look thinner, more fragile. She pushed an empty wheelchair into the room, a prop designed to evoke sympathy, even though Jacob had been brought in separately by a court-appointed orderly. She sat at the defendant's table, wiping her dry eyes with a tissue, playing the role of the devoted wife besieged by a toxic family. Her lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Sterling, wasted no time attacking me. "Your Honor," Sterling boomed, pointing a finger at me. "This petition is a farce. It is the vindictive act of a disgruntled mother, Eleanor Gallagher, who is currently suspended from her job for fraud and was arrested just last week for threatening my client with a weapon. She is jealous of her son's marriage, and she is using the court to harass a young woman who has given up everything to care for a disabled husband." I sat still. I did not fidget. I did not cry. I looked at Vanessa, and for the first time, she looked away. Then Malik stood up. He did not shout. He simply plugged his laptop into the courtroom's projector system. "We do not need to argue about character, Your Honor," Malik said smoothly. "We only need to look at the math and the footage." The first clip played. It was from the kitchen camera. It showed Vanessa standing over the stove, measuring out half a cup of broth. "He is complaining about hunger." Vanessa's voice rang out from the speakers, clear and sharp. "Good. Hunger keeps him compliant." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Vanessa stiffened, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the table. Malik did not stop. He called our surprise witness. A woman named Sarah stood up. She was 40 years old, from Ohio. "Can you tell the court who your grandfather was?" Malik asked. "Arthur Penn," Sarah said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "He was a resident at Silver Pines Care." "Vanessa." She was his night nurse. "He lost 20 pounds in 3 months. She told us he just wasn't hungry. We found out later she was billing for meals he never got. We settled because we just wanted her gone. Vanessa's lawyer jumped up. Objection relevance. This is hearsay from 5 years ago. It establishes a pattern of predation, the judge said, leaning forward. Overruled. Then came the final blow. Malik played the video Tyler had recovered from the deleted archives. It was a live stream segment Vanessa thought was gone forever, on the giant screen. Vanessa's face appeared in close-up, reading a donation comment. "Thank you for the $50. User Kingslayer," Vanessa said on the screen, smiling that sickeningly sweet smile. Then her expression shifted as she thought the stream had cut. God, if my fat mother-in-law dies, at least I won't have to share the monthly check with her anymore. She is just a parasite on my inheritance. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was the silence of a mask shattering. I took the stand next. I kept my voice low and steady. The investigation at Horizon accused me of accessing Jacob's file at 2 a.m. on the 12th. I told the judge. But at 2 a.m. on the 12th, I was at the emergency pharmacy across town, buying supplies for Jacob's pressure sores. I have the dated receipt, and the pharmacy has security footage of me. I could not have been at my computer. But Vanessa, she was at home, and she had my password notebook. Vanessa stood up. She could not help herself. The facade of the weeping saint cracked, revealing the ugly thing underneath. "You are lying," she shrieked, slamming her hand on the table. "I took care of him. I wiped him. I fed him. I deserve that money. Jacob is ungrateful. And you are just a fat old pig who refused to die." The courtroom erupted. Cameras flashed. The judge banged his gavel, his face thunderous. "Order, Ms. Ray, sit down, or I will hold you in contempt." But the damage was done. Everyone had seen it. Jacob, sitting in his wheelchair near the bailiff, looked at his wife with eyes that were finally, painfully clear. "I grant the temporary guardianship to the state-appointed independent advocate," the judge ruled, his voice cutting through the noise. "And I am granting Mrs. Gallagher permission to reside with her son to assist in his care. Effective immediately. Furthermore, I am forwarding the transcripts of this hearing and all digital evidence to the District Attorney's Office for review regarding criminal charges." Vanessa was not arrested right there, but her prison was already built. As she walked out of the courthouse, the press was waiting. She tried to cover her face, but there was nowhere to hide. "Vanessa, did you starve him? Vanessa? What about Silver Pines? Did you grease the ramp?" The questions hit her like stones. I stood at the top of the courthouse steps, watching the sea of microphones swallow her whole. She was alone. The comments section had turned on her. The law had turned on her. And for the first time, she looked small. I felt Rosa squeeze my hand. "Let's go get your son," Rosa said. I nodded. I did not smile. This was not a victory lap. It was just the end of the occupation. The trial of the state of Ohio versus Vanessa Cole, her real name, we discovered began 3 months later. The charges were a laundry list of moral and legal failures, abuse of a vulnerable adult, insurance fraud, financial exploitation, and tampering with public records. The courtroom was packed, buzzing with the kind of national media attention that usually follows celebrity scandals, not domestic tragedies. The prosecutor, a sharp woman with eyes like flint, laid out the evidence we had painstakingly assembled. It was a mountain of proof. She showed the jury the Horizon logs, the buried incident reports from Silver Pines, the video of the greased ramp, and the recovered chat logs where Vanessa bragged about her donation revenue. Then came the final twist that silenced the defense table. A forensic accountant testified that Vanessa had been siphoning 40% of the live stream donations and Jacob's disability back pay into an offshore account held by a shell company. This was not a desperate wife making mistakes. It was a business plan 5 years in the making. Vanessa tried one last Hail Mary. On the stand, she wept without tears, claiming she was suffering from caregiver burnout and severe depression. She begged for empathy, but the prosecutor simply played a clip from her content strategy planning session, where Vanessa laughed and said, "If he cries, the engagement goes up by 20%. The jury looked at her with expressions ranging from disgust to horror. Then it was Jacob's turn. He had been seeing a therapist, but he still looked small in his chair. He gripped the microphone, his knuckles white. He admitted that he had let her control him because he was terrified of being alone. He admitted he had believed her lies about me. Then he looked straight at Vanessa. "My mother might be fat," Jacob said, his voice shaking but gaining strength. "She might be slow, but she never looked at me and saw a cash machine. She saw her son." I took the stand, last. I did not cry. I did not scream. I simply described the reality of my love versus her greed. I told them about waking up at 3 a.m. to check his blood pressure. I described pushing his wheelchair through 6 inches of snow to get to his doctor's. I contrasted that with the image of Vanessa loosening the bolts on the ramp to stage a tragedy for clicks. The comparison did not need adjectives. It just needed to be heard. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They found Vanessa guilty on nearly every count. The judge, before delivering the sentence, looked over his glasses at her. He quoted the recording that had started it all. "You called Mrs. Gallagher a parasite," the judge said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "But the evidence shows that the only parasite in this family was you. Your contempt for the disabled and the elderly is not just a character flaw, Ms. Cole. It is a danger to society." He sentenced her to 15 years in state prison and ordered full financial restitution. After the trial, Jacob and I sat in the quiet hallway. He couldn't look me in the eye. "Mum," he whispered, Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at him. I loved him. But the wound was deep, and it would leave a scar that weather changes would always make ache. "I won't lie to you, Jacob," I said softly. "I will never trust you the way I did before. That part is gone. But I am your mother. I will take care of you until I can't stand up anymore. The rest, the forgiveness part, you have to fix that with yourself." Malik helped us secure the restitution funds from Vanessa's seized assets. We used enough to pay off the debts she had racked up in Jacob's name and to rent a clean, ground-floor apartment with no ramps to Greece. We signed the rest over to a legal fund for victims of caregiver abuse. And as part of the settlement, the streaming platform was forced to divert all future revenue from Vanessa's archived channel to that same charity. On the day we moved into the new apartment, I pushed Jacob down the sidewalk. The autumn air was crisp. We passed an electronic billboard flashing the evening news, and Vanessa's mugshot appeared on the screen. Jacob flinched and tried to turn his head. "Don't look," I said, keeping the wheelchair moving forward. "You know how that story ends." I paused for a second, looking at the cracks in the pavement. "Just remember one thing," I told him. "The first time you heard someone call me your fat mother, you stayed silent. The next time anyone disrespects a person you love like that, you need to be the one to speak up before an old woman has to go to war for you." Jacob nodded, dropping his head. We continued down the street, our shadows stretching long and thin against the brick buildings. We were bruised, and we were tired. But for the first time in a long time, the wheels were moving on solid ground. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to hear where you guys are tuning in from, so please drop your city or country in the comments below if you want to hear more stories like this. Make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people. Stay safe out there.